advisor within the Secretariat of Making Finance Work for Africa. And it is indeed my pleasure and honor to welcome you to this webinar we are co-hosting with our partner of Agritask, which is an agri-tech company, and the German International Cooperation Agency, the GIS. We would like to apologize for the short delay in starting this session, but actually we want to have more participants joining the platform so that we can all benefit from the very interesting webinar that is coming up. As it appears on the screen, the topic of today's webinar is crop insurance data analytics, geographical information system, which stands for GIS, and product design. The webinar is a second of a series of 2 webinars we have partnered up with Agritask to deliver. The previous ones focus on the onboarding of new clients, monitoring and claim management using remote sensing solutions, and digitization in agricultural insurance. Both webinars aim primarily to share insight and experience on how technology are helping to make headway in promoting agricultural insurance, particularly in Africa. As you may already know, Africa as a continent is characterized by a low uptake of agricultural insurance, which is also unevenly distributed across the continent. However, the adverse effect of climate change on the livelihood of smallholder farmers is further strengthening the value proposition to develop agricultural insurance in Africa. Unfortunately, agricultural insurance and disaster insurance are either unavailable or prohibitively expensive in many developing countries, including Africa. There is a fundamental problem with the design of agri-insurance products due to the lack of data and the data that are available are not utilized in an efficient manner. This results in a significant gap between the calculated payout and the actual losses suffered by farmers, leading to low product acceptance. In general, farmers do not see the importance of agricultural insurance until they can see the bigger picture. The question is often whether governments should intervene to support the development of agricultural insurance sector in Africa. And that remains, and that's still very relevant. This webinar will shed light on the power of technology in capturing and analyzing data and how this could be leveraged optimally in product design with significant implication on premium costs and payout. Today, we have distinguished speakers from Agritask, as I already said, and an excellent moderator from the GIS. Before handing the floor to the moderator, I will quickly share with you some practical information on how the webinar will unfold, and as well as highlight on making finance work for Africa. Next slide, please. Today's sessions will last for about 15. Next slide, please. Okay. Before I develop further, this is the outline of our sessions. We go first to the housekeeping, and then we will have share some highlight on making finance work for Africa, and then get into the presentation itself. And afterwards, we have the Q&A. All together, we aim to stick within a maximum of 1 hour and 15 minutes. All microphones will be muted automatically throughout the webinar to ensure the highest quality of this experience. All the time through the sessions, you can submit your questions using the chat box and the Q&A features that appear on the bottom right of hand side of the Zoom platform. You can also raise your hand. You can raise your hand if you really want us to unmute your microphone and then you can speak live. Also very important, after this webinars, the recordings as well as the presentation will be circulated not only to the participants that are the attendees, but all to all the participants that have registered for the for all the participants that are registered for this webinar. And it will this information will also be available on the Making Finance for Africa platform that you can see here. Finally, you can message the organizer if you are encountering any challenges. And also at the end of the sessions, a questionnaire will appear automatically. And then we really encourage you to fill in this questionnaire, because the information that you provide allows us to improve our future webinars and also the quality of this experience. Next slide, please. Next slide. Before we move into the presentation, the core of the presentation itself, I would like to share with you some highlight on Making Finance Work for Africa, which is a G8 initiative launched in 2007 with the mandate to facilitate financial sector development and knowledge sharing on the continent. We are a platform of development partner, African governments, private sectors, and we have the umbrella objective to unleash the full potential of African financial sector in order to drive economic development and reduce the poverty on the continent. Next slide. The Secretariat of Making Finance Work for Africa is hosted by the African Development Bank in Abidjan. And then the Secretariat work along three major strategic priorities for now, which are financial inclusion, long-term finance, financial stability, and governance. And to really touch on all these key pillars, we engage with with the stakeholders through of thematic that appears here. You can see that agricultural finance is one of them, but you also have like SME finance, trade finance. On long-term finance, which are part of our financial inclusion agenda. On long-term finance, we work with institutional investors, we work on housing finance, and to ensure the stability and improve the governance of African financial system, we have established the Community African Banking Supervisory jointly with the Association of African Central Banks. And also to recognize the fact that the banking sector is remains the most dominant segment of the financial sector in our continent. Finally, knowledge management and advocacy are the cross-cutting pillar on what we do. They are really key in achieving our objective. Next slide. I think on the next slide, we just see the logos of our major partners. As I said, the Secretariat of African Development Bank, but we are sponsored by a number of development partners that really help us to deliver our work program. We need to acknowledge their contribution and express our gratitude. You can see here, in addition to the bank, AFDB, you have the German Corporation, which is partnering also. Also, it's an intellectual partner also for this event, but the Agence Française de Développement, the European Investment Bank, the Afrexim banks, and the European Unions, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Belgium, of Netherlands, in Boza. Next slide, please. On that, I think I will introduce you our moderator of today's sessions. Our moderator is Dr. Mihai Yandele, if I pronounce this well, but I think you will correct me. He's an advisor with the Sector Program Global Initiative, which also is part of the program Economic and Social Development and Digitization within the German International Cooperation Agency, GIS. He has a very wide experience in all what is, I think he has PhD in mathematics. He has a wide experience on climate change issue, agricultural finance issue. I think I will not elaborate much further. I will hand over the floor to Niha, who can really complement his bios, and then also introduce the two presenters of today from Agritask. Niha, you have the floor now. Thank you
very much. Thank you, Hugues. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great pleasure for me to be the moderator of today's webinar on crop insurance. And also because this topic of agriculture insurance, or parametric insurance, and associated things like climate risk insurance and inclusive insurance are very close to my heart. I had been working on this topic for the last 10 years, particularly in India and for projects in Zambia. And as Hugues mentioned, I mean, agriculture insurance has a vast potential to help marginalized communities to better manage their risk. It could help to de-risk agricultural value chains, help companies, agribusinesses, or financial institutions to better manage their risks. But often the access to adequate solutions, particularly for smallholder farmers, is limited for these kind of products. And even when we look at parametric insurance, which has been introduced like 20 years back, it has been introduced because it was introduced to resolve some of the supply and distribution challenges that were faced by traditional insurance. But even parametric insurance could not fully unfold its potential. And there might be various reasons to it. But one of the reasons I would think is that parametric introduced the problem of basis risk. So the risk that there's a mismatch between the payout of a product and the actual loss experience of a smallholder farmer. So from my perspective, I would say there are demand side challenges, supply side challenges, and enabling environment challenges. And on the demand side, you have the typical things like trust, affordability. When you think about smallholder farmers, you have the problem of low insurance literacy and the lack of adequate insurance products and basis risk for parametric insurance. Now, on the supply side, you often have the problem of limited technical expertise of local insurance companies, as well as the problem that the customer base is a little difficult in the sense that they are often smallholder farmers in remote areas. So the question is how to distribute the product to them. So finding adequate distribution channels is for sure a problem on the supply side. And on the enabling side, you have the problems often that in some countries you don't have an adequate regulatory framework for index insurance. And in many contexts, you have a problem of having good quality data available. That could be crop yield, it could be weather data or other satellite-based data for structuring products or monitoring products, insurance products. So this is why I find it particularly interesting to see what Agritask will be presenting, because companies like Agritask working on technology solutions, but not in an isolated way, they could add or address a lot of these challenges which are there on the enabling side, on the demand side, on the supply side. So this is quite promising for the future. Let me also give you some background on GIZ. So GIZ is a service provider in the field of international cooperation and sustainable development. We fully belong to the Federal Republic of Germany, and we have presence in over 120 countries all over the world. GIZ has been working on the topic of what I now call climate risk insurance, but you could also include agriculture insurance for more than 15 years in different countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And we also host two secretariats which are quite relevant in this context. There's the Secretariat of the Resilience Global Partnership that is hosted at GIZ, and there's the Secretariat of the Access to Insurance Initiative. Now, let me talk about this first one, the Resilience Global Partnership. Now, all the projects that GIZ implements, which are related to agriculture insurance or climate risk insurance, could be considered as the German contribution to achieving the goals of the Resilience Global Partnership. Now, this partnership brings together countries, civil society, international organizations, academia, and the private sector. It was launched in 2017 in Bonn during the COP, and it is a joint initiative of G7, G20, V20, but it builds upon an initiative, the Resilience Initiative, which started 2015, launched in 2015. And the vision of this partnership is to strengthen the resilience of developing countries and protect the lives and livelihoods of poor and vulnerable people against impacts of disasters and climate risks. Now, after I've talked now so much, let me introduce the presenters, the colleagues from Agritask. So first, Rom Aviv will be going. He joined Agritask as Managing Director, Head of Insurance this year, beginning of this year. But he has quite some experience in the field of nearly 12 years working with insurance-linked securities, insurance, reinsurance, structured financial products, working for insurance-focused hedge funds in different countries, but also advising NGOs, which I find particularly interesting. And his focus has been on natural disaster risk financing. He earned his PhD in financial mathematics from ETH Zurich in Switzerland. And so after Rom, we have Einav presenting, Einav Gold. She joined Agritask in 2018 as Insurance Product Director, and she leads all the insurance product design and development processes. Over the last 2 years, she managed many digital transformation projects for agricultural stakeholders, particularly in Africa and Latin America. And she has a background in research and accounting. She has an MA in environmental studies from Tel Aviv University and a BA in accounting from Universidad de Buenos Aires. Okay, so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. I look really forward to Rom and Einav, and to all the participants, please, like you said, put your questions into the FNQ Q&A and to the chat box. Thank you. Over to you, Rom.
Thanks very much, Nihar. It's a great pleasure to be here. Good afternoon to everyone from Tel Aviv. We are really thrilled and privileged to have the opportunity to present here for the second time. Our plan today is, on the one hand, to share real, tangible solutions that can help growing the crop insurance market in Africa. That would be the focus of Einav. On the other hand, we would like to offer some thoughts about the future and share our vision. And despite that this is the second time that we're going to present in this forum, for good order's sake and for everyone's benefit, I'll start the presentation by introducing our business. Then I'll go through the key challenges and opportunities in the crop insurance African market. And then I will hand over to Einav to do the real part, the hard part. And this is to show you some very, what we think, innovative and interesting solutions that already exist. And some of them will further amplify our goal, which is to essentially shrink the protection gap in the African market and introduce better insurance solutions in the crop market. Next slide, please. So I'll briefly introduce our organization, Agritask. We are predominantly a business-to-business software company, and we were established in 2010. The main reason that Agritask was founded is because the co-founders back then were looking for a reaction, or looking to respond to the growing demand for technology and technological advancements in agricultural operations. And in the last decade, the company has grown to around 80 people of various professionals and backgrounds. That would include agronomical sciences, data science, software development, GIS, finance, actuarial sciences, and even more than this. We have 3 offices, and whilst we're headquartered in Tel Aviv, we have also a large hub for software development in Bulgaria, as well as an office for business development in Latin America, which is based in Brazil. We have at the moment around 75 clients in various segments that would include corporate growers, food and beverage companies. We're involved in a variety of regional projects across the globe. We work with farm and seed companies. And lastly, what's a very important vertical for our business that has been tremendously growing is agricultural insurance and finance. Whilst we're a for-profit organization, the nature of our business is highly associated with social impact. And our goal is to enhance, in many cases, the standard of living in various communities in emerging markets. And in this context, we have received a significant investment from the German government, from the through their insure resilience vehicle in the middle of 2019. Next slide, please. When looking at our global footprint, you can notice that we're very much concentrated in Latin America and Central America, simply because this was the genesis of the company and one of the first projects essentially emerged there. Since then, we've developed our footprint to many other places, and at the moment in Africa, we work in probably around 10 countries from the north to the south. And our ambition is to improve on the insurance side, our ambition is to improve the insurance inclusivity, its affordability and empowerment of livelihood of smallholder farmers globally. So we strive to operate worldwide, yet overcome local obstacles or continent-based obstacles in the context of Africa, as we think that many of them are applicable uniformly to many countries in the continent. Next slide, please. And by setting the scene to this presentation, I would like to first turn into the key problems that exist and are quite evident as a risk factor to most of us. You see here two exhibits on the upper and the lower part that represent two phenomena that are closely related. The first one shows very interestingly that the percentage of a decade that will be featuring droughts now and 30 years now from now offers unfortunately some very negative scenarios. You can see that in certain areas the percentage of a decade that could be featuring a drought can be as high as 60 to 80%, meaning that 6 out of the 10 or 8 out of the 10 years will be featuring a drought. The lower exhibit projects the increased temperatures per each area. The two exhibits definitely suggest that drought as one of the key perils in Africa can cause a significant disruption. And let's see what it can be actually. Could we please go to the next slide? So this is an example of a very extreme scenario, or specifically how 5 degrees of Celsius change will impact the production of 4 different crops: maize, rice, wheat, and soy. It can go down by a multiple of 0.2 to a multiple of 1.5 in the production. So what we learn from here is that the climate change and specifically the amount of drought is expected to increase, and obviously the negative impact on crop production is going to be very significant. The most natural solution that one could think about from a financial standpoint to mitigate those risks and their consequences is insurance, i.e. the ability to transfer this risk to third parties for a certain premium. Let's go to the next slide, please. And whilst this is a solution for many lines of businesses, not only insurance, as natural disasters are affecting the entire globus, the main difficulty in Africa, as well known to us, is that while we anticipate this phenomenon to essentially impact adversely the livelihoods of smallholder farmers, the mitigation techniques are not really there. What we see here is perhaps a slightly outdated chart, but it well summarizes the penetration levels of microinsurance, agricultural microinsurance across the continent. And we see that it barely exists in some countries, and in other countries, it's very low. In other words, understanding that as an example, the amount of drought is going to increase in the future and the impact is going to be devastating, and there's lack of insurance. The challenge here is significant, but so is the opportunity in our opinion. Next slide, please. So let's focus for a second on the challenges, the problems, and also what we believe will serve as opportunities. There are at least two different angles that could be considered. First of all is the smallholders farmers, i.e. the growers, and the finance and the insurance institutions that are essentially the capacity providers that mitigate those risks. There are several evident issues that are faced by smallholder farmers. Their livelihood is dependent on crop production as well as their resilience and food security. Climate change has its tendencies, as we've seen, and they don't really have access to affordable products and to products that do the right job, meaning that provide them with the payouts whenever the events happen, whether this is because the products are simply not there or perhaps because the products are not suitable and the basis risk is tremendous. If you look at finance and or banks or insurance companies, and focusing on insurance in this presentation, the problem with smallholder farmers is first that you don't really know where they are. So you can't necessarily even offer to them a traditional product, as in distribute the product to the smallholder farmers without knowing where they are. And given the informal relationship that exists between various entities that connect those insurance companies to smallholder farmers, insurance companies try to leverage that, and came up with a variety of products that are based on indices, as we will elaborate in the future, which caused issues with basis risks. The opportunities here, as we will see in the future, is to tackle those issues with the help of technology. That is, coming up with scalable products that massively capture a lot of farmers, offer to them an affordable product and a product that does the job, meaning a product that pays whenever things really happen. And that has to be scalable, as I've mentioned, affordable, and also accessible, which is a non-trivial task. Next slide, please. The way we're looking at this ecosystem, not from a commercial perspective, but essentially from a technical perspective and from the life cycle policy standpoint, is that in order to connect the farmers to the solution, and in order for the solution to become appropriate and tackle their problems, we're offering here this exhibit showing the key steps. The onboarding part that could be done via remote tools, utilizing satellite, or by essentially focusing and having a very strong motivation to map the farmers, again, in an efficient way and scalable way. To that, you need mobile tools as well as remote sensing tools. Then, with the help of the same tools as well as data analytics, once you know the location of the farmers, you can derive a lot of information about the risk profile of those smallholders, and as a result of this, design much better products. We will take the slide at the very end of the presentation and think about the vision and what could happen in the lengthier future. But next slide, please. But before that, we'll focus on what actually can be done already tomorrow, or actually what is being done since yesterday, and what could help in tackling those issues. I'll hand over in a second to Einav that will guide you first through some GIS capabilities, and then she will discuss 3 use cases: how to detect plots and crops remotely. That's obviously that would save enormous labor work and also costs. How to improve some relevant products such as area yield indices with the help of satellite technology. And lastly, how to mitigate moral hazard and fraud in the context of loss adjustments by having more precise inspection protocols and path planning. So with that, I'll hand over to Einav. Einav,
thanks, Rom. Thanks. Next slide, thank you. So the idea, as Rom was saying, is to go a bit more on concrete examples on some of the remote sensing and GIS tools that can help insurance schemes for better data analysis and product design with focus on smallholder farmers. So we talked last time, and I will just recap on that a bit, of the possibility of using satellite images such as Sentinel or Landsat to calculate vegetation index, and this is what we see on the left side of the screen. So we have the possibility to have NDVI, that is the vegetation index, to control the crop growth. What we want to also to talk today about is how, based on these first tools, there's even more things that we can do related to the insurance. So what we have here on the right side of the screen is the ability to classify different sections inside one same plot according to crop growth, and be able to examine them separately. So what we have here is we classify them according which sectors of one plot are above, below, or in the average of the vegetation index, and create an uniformity kind of map, where you see here that the basic thing that we are seeing here is that we can see how homogeneous or heterogeneous a plot is. And when we see it like this way, we understand that the way that we are taking today's samples, for example, yield samples on the field, sometimes arbitrary samples, don't really represent the reality of a plot. So things that can be done to better improve the way that we are analyzing samples and taking data from the field is by using the knowledge that we have from the remote sensing to better direct these samples. So what this tool of uniformity analysis can do is improve the methodology in which samples are taken, and really take samples of each one of these categories in order to better calculate and extrapolate the results of the different samples to the whole plot. And this is very much used, for example, in area yield index, for example, when we take yield samples. So what we see is that we gain not only visibility of what's the crop health, but we can also use this as a base for better understanding and improving the methodologies that we currently have when we take different samples on the field, and we send people to the field to gather information. Next slide, please. Okay. The previous example that we were discussing, I mentioned Sentinel and Landsat, are based on not the highest resolution of images, and we wanted, and also based on what we talked last week, we wanted also to introduce you to different tools that are enabled by high resolution images. The usage of high resolution images has been growing in the last couple of years, and also it's getting more and more accessible. So the use of high resolution images for insurance will be growing in the next couple of years, and we want to show you different capabilities that we can get with such an images. And when we say high resolution images, we can get also like 0.5 meter of resolution, and that's what's so important about them. So for example, in this case that we see now in the screen, what it allows us is to really calculate the percentage of planted area, and also be able to calculate the amount of trees or plants that we have in a specific line, or by hectare. And this, for example, if we think of insurance and small farmers, and a scheme where we have like a whole country of millions of farmers. So we have a sum insured that is reported, and an insured area that is reported. And this tool really allows us to understand if there is any difference between what's reported as an insured area by the different farmers or aggregators or the cooperatives, and the real planted area in the beginning of the season. So it really allows to detect the planted area and the amount of plants that we have in a specific plot. Next slide, please. So when it comes to high resolution images, there's a lot of things. So I will show you also another short example. So it's not only about like knowing the insured area to be able to compare this with the information that was informed in the policy, but also be able to use it throughout the season to identify the crop health and the tree health. In this case, we use high resolution images for trees because these are also high value crops. what we get here is that first we can identify each individual tree. We can really count the trees that we have per line. We are able to calculate the distance between the lines also, and understand how much yield potential that can be. But also based on the size of the canopy, we can also tackle, we can also identify what's the health status of the different plants. So it really allows us to monitor throughout the season the different variations that can be and how the different plants are being affected. So it really helps on the calculation and the claims part to detect what's the situation of each one of the plots. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked until now about satellite, its optical images. We talked about high resolution images, and we wanted also to bring you another type of example, another type of technology, and what this allows us is radar information. This is an example of Sentinel-1. What it allows us is like the problems that we have with optical satellite images is that clouds and clouds presence really affects the possibility to get insights and get the correct data. So what radar information allows us is that we can do analysis even if it's cloudy. And some of the information that we can get from a satellite like Sentinel-1 is once we have a flood, being able to estimate and quantify the affected area. So what's happening here is that we get the reflections in this area, and once we have the flood, we can really assess which are the areas that are affected and quantify this area to understand how far did the damage go. And this is a really nice tool for different regions and really can be done, as I said before, even if there is clouds. So these are different types of data sources that today we can use in insurance to better improve the data analysis that we are doing, but also how we can use it for product design in a way that we can assess damage. Next slide, please. So in the same line of this thought of calculating the amount, the affected areas and the damage that we have, we can go back a second to the vegetation index and take it to an example of drought. When we have satellite images and vegetation index, we can see throughout the season. So we are getting images, let's say every 5 to 10 days. We really can see and see the growth of the plant. So when there is a damage event or weather event that really affected the productivity and the crop yield, we can quantify the amount of area that was affected by comparing the two images like before and after and assess the difference in the vegetation index. And then we can see which ones are below what we had before and really quantify based on the plot area how much of this area or percentage of the plot was affected after the reported event. Next slide, please. So we would like now to present you 3 concrete use cases of application of remote sensing tools. This is the first one. It's a model that will be combined between plot boundaries detection and crop detection. We will start with the first part of this use case. So, and Ron was mentioning also this before about how important it's to start by the onboarding of the farmers, by knowing where the farmers are and what they are growing. So by the use of remote sensing, and this example that I'm showing you now, it's from Sentinel-2. What we can do is define the plot boundaries remotely, so we don't need to specify what are the limits of each plot. We can detect this remotely, and this helps to verify, for example, the quality of the data that we are receiving for clients. So for example, there is some data that the insurance companies today have, but sometimes this is not the most accurate or the most precise. So if we want to use, there's a couple of uses that we can give to this tool. One is to verify the existing information with this model to compare it. We can also take a specific region or a country and use this tool to start doing a rural cadastral survey. It will be used also, as I said before, as a base for the next model, that it's the crop detection I will explain in a second. And also it allows to register a mass amount of farmers. So what we need in insurance is to know the specific location of the different farmers to understand what's the inherent risk of that area. So we need to know what's the crop and need to know what's the location in order to understand what are the normal conditions in terms of weather, in terms of soil taxonomy, what are the optimal conditions for the crop. And when we use these remote sensing tools, we will analyze it on a plot level, and we saw it before on the NDVI and on the satellite images. So it's very important to know where the location is. But when we have a huge amount of small holder farmers, sometimes it's very difficult to get this information. So this tool can really help give visibility of where are the farmers and which are the regions and the conditions that we have in that area. Next slide, please. Something that I did mention before. So the model that we saw right now, the plot level detection, we have checked it using some of the data, for example, in Agritask that we have, and knowing from the field data where the plots are. And actually that model has today an 85% of accuracy. And based on that accuracy of the plots, so what do we do is once we have the plot boundaries, we go to the second part of the analysis, that it's being able to detect what are the different crops that we have. This model, it's based on field data information and also on remote sensing. It's kind of like you combine the two data sources to teach the model how is the behavior of the different crops. So when we have field data and we know by fact what are the different crops in a specific area, so the model is able to complete the missing crops in the rest of the region that we are analyzing. The accuracy of this model depends on how much amount of data we have from the field. So what's happening is, and what's possible is that we will start with 1 year with one accuracy, but the different technologies and systems like Agritask allows to create a database and start collecting also like data from the field for next year's, be able to improve the accuracy. But it's a really good tool to identify what are the crops that are in a region if we are trying to penetrate a new market or to introduce a new insurance scheme or new product. So we can really understand what are the main crops in specific regions, understand what's the coverage, like how much area we have in this region, and understand what are the historical weather events or damage events that have affected. So it really helps to map and understand what is being grown and where. Next slide, please. So we mentioned this use case in the previous session for those of you that had participated. I will bring it back again today just to go a bit deeper on this use case of how we can use, for example, NDVI and some of the tools that I have mentioned today to better improve a product like Area Yield Index. So we are talking here about like the onboarding of the farmers and improving the data of where the location of the and the farmers are, about what are the plot boundaries. So this will be the start of the ability to design a better area yield index. The second step is enabling profiling farmers based on homogeneous risk parameters. So when we talk about smallholder farmers and we want to operate a big amount of farmers, what's possible is to aggregate them, but not just aggregate them in by administrative boundaries, but either by homogeneous risk parameters like precipitation, agriculture aptitude, soil taxonomy, historical information of yield, for example, if we have. So by profiling all these farmers, we know every time we have a plot being located, we can associate it to the risk that was analyzed before. So once we have this mapping, what we will do is that we can use the NDVI for monitoring and calculating yield potential. And what we want to do with this is identifying between, like within a same cluster, so within a same area with homogeneous condition, sample different kind of groups that statistically represent all kind of farmers that we have in that region. Okay, so what happens today is that crop cutting experiments are run very arbitrary, but if we already have this visibility of the performance and yield potential based on the NDVI and the crop growth of the different farmers, what we can do is, okay, create a method where we choose farmers of each one of these statistical groups to focus the samples on each one of them. And based on that, digitalize, send people to the field to make inspections. We will show you how we digitalize these inspections, but we talked also last time of the ability to use mobile applications to collect the data from the field to reduce the processing time and ensure the best practices. But also once we have these crop cutting experiments and we have the samples, when we calculate the index for each one of these clusters, that in the end, this will be the trigger for the different payouts, then what we do is that we calculate the index already based on the proportional amount of farmers that we have in each statistical group. So we are getting much more accurate yield estimations, and this will allow, of course, to reduce the basis risk that we currently have. Next slide. So I just want to show you some graphical examples of what I have just explained about this use case of area yield index. This is an example, for example, of Nigeria, where we did the risk-based clusterization based on weather information, cultural parameters, agricultural aptitude. And as I mentioned before, every time we locate a new farmer or we know where he's growing, we can already associate him to the corresponding risk based on the cluster information. And also this cluster information allows us to manage the triggers and manage the indexes per each cluster. So once we calculate the triggers, we can already calculate payouts and calculate payouts for all the farmers that are within this cluster. Next slide. And this is the graphical example of what I was saying of classifying the different groups of farmers within one specific cluster by their yield potential or their associated risk. We see here three colors, the green, the yellow, and the red. So in this case, when we are doing the crop cutting experiments, so we can arbitrarily select farmers, but select them within each one of these groups, and be aware, be sure that we are covering all the conditions, and we can later on have an index that much more representative of the reality of all farmers in the cluster. Next slide, please. So as the last use case, and to be able also to leave some time for a summary and for the questions, we want to show you how using satellite images, using remote sensing, and using the tools, for example, of the uniformity analysis that we were just mentioning, how once we have this, we digitalize the process for field inspections in order to reduce fraud and moral hazard. So we just saw a few seconds ago, how we classify the different farmers, but it can also be used to identify which are the farmers with high risk. So if we need to visit, for example, if we take indemnity, for example, can be used to identify which farmers to visit and which not. And if we see at parametric insurance, it will allow us to take samples of each one of these groups that we were mentioning. Once we identify the farmers that needs to be visited, the next thing is to also set a methodology of how to take samples within one same farm, one same plot. So it's not that we go to one plot, we take one sample, but either we can take several samples to better calculate. So we can use also these homogeneity, uniformity models that we talked in the beginning to, once we identify the farmers that needs to be visited, also to define an inspection plan in each one of the plots. once we have this information, so then we combine it with the digital tools and the technology, for example, of platforms like Agritask and that have mobile applications to send people to the farm to perform these inspections. So what will happen is that they will receive the task in their phone. They will see the path that they need to walk. And in each one of these points that we define for him, he will be able to report the data of the assessment of the damage or the assessment of the yield or any other agronomical information that needs to be taken in the inspection. The mobile applications today are working with GPS, so we can really see not only where we are sending the inspector, but also what he has performed in the field. So we can control that the farm was actually visited. We can see what are the points that were taken and that the data was taken really on the plot and not later on by someone's memory or just by someone putting random numbers. The digitalization of field inspections can really help to reduce also human error, to define best practices and standardize the way that we are taking samples. So as I was mentioning before, this will help in that way to reduce different kind of moral hazard and also like the fraud that we are having today when it comes to field inspections. So these are a bit of the tools that we can access, we can use. Of course, there are much more, but at least to see that there is technology, that there is the ability to, by remote sensing, gain visibility on what are the things happening on the field in the past, in the present, and also to predict what will be the yield, for example, like the yield potential, and how we can use them in the different design processes of the policies, either if it's on defining pricing or defining how we are assessing damage or how we are monitoring and how we are, for example, doing the underwriting process. So Rom, I will give it back to you so we can finish with the last comments, the vision, and go to questions.
Sure, thanks a lot, Ignav. So I'll very briefly browse through the summary and some of the conclusions and the vision. If you could go to the next slide, please. We've seen here really plenty of examples and use cases where satellite technology and remote sensing and generally analytics could help in a variety of functionalities. This is applicable to a variety of plot sizes, but the principles remain. Now, some takeaways that I'd like you to take from here is that, first of all, such products as area yield index can be significantly improved, and some of them lack rigor, and with special analysis and satellite images, you will be able to achieve it. Then fraud in the context of loss adjustments and moral hazard could be mitigated as well through essentially by cutting some costs and improving the robustness of your operation. The byproduct of this would be that you reduce fraud and moral hazard. Also, as implying now, before concluding with some vision, is that we think that underwriting in the future will be much more personalized than it is now, because all the tools simply exist to cater for it. Next slide, please. Just continuing with the conclusion, so indemnity products will be more affordable, or variation of indemnity products. Essentially, area yield index are quasi-indemnity products. They will be more efficient, more accessible, and more precise. You'll have real-time visibility into the farm, just as you would have real-time visibility into your home with a camera. Then better product will lead to better growth, shrinking of the protection gap and increasing of penetration level. And a very important element here is scalability, and which is essentially massive registration of growers through remote tools. That also could be obtained by such techniques as remote crop detection and plot detection. And I'll just conclude with very, next slide, please, just with very lucrative thoughts here. I'll start with the second item, actually, and this has to do with satellite images. People were asking us, what about high resolution images? Obviously, we know that they're all expensive, but think about it this way. Smallholder farmers in 10 years time from now, in rural areas, we'll be having mobile phones with very high probability. Now, think about them as users that could be essentially getting access to those images. We think that some providers will definitely consider giving it for free. Just because what is an asset in this context is the smallholder farmers themselves, i.e. the users, which is a very relevant metric in B2C businesses. And insurance-wise, why not then going for self-service? If the smallholder farmers in 10 years from now, or majority of them will be having smartphones, why not buying, and you know, it's quite easier to measure a small farm than a huge farm. So actually having a small farm can be an advantage here. So if you can buy in some places these days on online basis, a car insurance or auto or a home insurance, there's no any reason why you wouldn't be able to buy a small farm insurance, especially given that the premium is not so significant. And when the statistical sample is significant and the data is accurate, the insurance company could bear that variability. And lastly, I've just started saying it and I'll ramp up with this, the product design will be much more personalized, benefiting from the fact that much more technology is going to be commoditized, available, cheaper, and resulted in products will be designed accordingly. So I think that's it from our side, from Agritask, and thanks a lot for the attention in this 1 hour, and I'll hand to Nihar.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Anna, for your presentation. It was great, and you really stick to your time, and it was extremely interesting. And we got a couple of questions, and I'm happy to see that some were answered by you already, Ron. I will raise them. I will maybe cluster them a bit. So one set of questions was related to accuracy. For example, Daniel Micheluti asked, what is the precision of the yield estimates? So the error in percentage. And similarly, or related to that, Frank Hollinger asked what level of resolution is needed for crop detection in a smallholder setting where we have small land sizes. And how many iterations do you need to get sufficiently high accuracy of above 95%? And does it also work for tree crops? So these are some precision questions, if I may ask them to you.
Sure. Of course, because this is a hard question. Hard questions, I'll let Einav maybe take it. I'll handle the easy ones.
Thank you. Such a good person. On the yield questions, just to clarify, what we were mentioning today is still not an yield estimation in terms of kilograms per hectare, but rather a yield potential and the yield risk. Of course, everyone wants the yield estimation magical formula, but this is not the model that we were presenting today. But what we are doing on the yield part, so the accuracy is quite high, but just to understand that it's related to how the model works is that we are analyzing the historical NDVI potential, like on a specific area. So we know what are the maximum values that we have for specific crop in one specific area. So the potential and the risk is classified according to the normal behavior of the crop in that same area. So what we mentioned today is the ability to classify them, and that's why I'm mentioning, because the question of accuracy, it's a bit weird when we're talking about classification of big groups, of 3 groups, and it's based, the accuracy is big, but it's depending based, again, on the normal values and the potential that we see historical in a specific area. In terms of the crop identification, of course, as much as I was mentioning before, the crop detection depends on field data. So as much of field data we have, the better the data will be. And the same thing goes for images. If we don't have high resolution images, of course, the model will be less accurate, but as long as we move through the higher resolution images, then we will get better resolution and closer to 95%, as they were asking, and they were super precise on that. But what I want to say is that not because we don't have that much of information and we don't have high resolution images, it's not that we cannot at least get the model. And I think here there is also a curve of learning that we have in different markets, and the different insurance companies have to do we have a starting point, and it doesn't mean that that's the end. So we will start with maybe lower accuracy, but there are technological tools to gather the information that it's missing in order to get to the highest accuracy possible. And I think that's the message I would like you guys to take today. It's like a model like that, crop detection, it can be combined with other tools to learn more and report more data from the field in order to improve it for future years. And I think that's also important to understand that there is a vision, but there is a starting point, and there are tools that enable still to use the models even when there is not that much data. And I think I read also, just to finish this idea, I read a question about drones. When we talk about images, of course it will depend on the drone, but all the indexes and all the analysis that we mentioned today will adapt to the resolution that we are working. So we can work with satellite, with radar images, we can work with drones, and there's also like the airplane. So all these images in terms of the different bands that the images will have. So we can do similar analysis, and I will go back to this. We need to understand what's the technology that we have available, what are the resolutions that we have available, and based on that, see what is the accuracy level that we need in the moment of development, and also the need that we have for the insurance products. So in terms of images, I just want to show you the different. Of course, it's hard with low resolution to calculate the plant sphere line, but still, like, we can use with high resolution images and also with drone images, we can calculate, for example, the vegetation index and calculate uniformity.
Yes, thank you. I think another related question was also regarding risk classification. So since high resolution satellite data are only available since the last few years, how many years of satellite data do you need for risk classification?
For the classification of the yield data, you mean?
I think that was related to the yield data, yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to images, it's right that the high resolution images, there's less years, and that in insurance companies in general, we are used, like, it's used to be like to use like 20 years and 10 years. And sometimes because we are looking for long periods of time of information, then we give up on resolution. So sometimes that's also what's happening. And it's also like best practices to use between like 15, 20 years for the analysis. And this is what it's currently on the market. But that's why we also wanted to bring the high resolution images possibility today, because it's something that it's growing, like we already have, I think, like quite a few years. In some cases, we have 5 years, 6 years, 10 years of high resolution images, and we are going forward. So that's where I think there is need to be like a review of the current processes, the review of the current product design, because like we have been giving up on resolution because of the time series. At least that's my opinion. Maybe Rom has another opinion on that, but I think that's what's good today, to be able to discuss about things in high resolution images and how we can consider them in the future for product design.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we are running out of time. There are still some questions which we couldn't answer. I'm very sorry, but we will take note of the questions, and I'm sure that Agritask will look at them and respond to you accordingly. So thank you very much for all the questions, and sorry if we couldn't answer all of them, but it seems that you're very engaged and very interested. So I would like to hand over to Ike.
Okay, thank you very much, Niha. Yes, maybe we can still give around 2 minutes to the
okay, sure.
Then. Yes.
Then I'll ask one of the questions. One of the questions was that it was really by Leonard that he appreciated that this could be like a game changer, this solutions presented for agriculture insurance. But the question is, how easy are these models to explain to small-scale farmers? And what is your experience about high basis risk? And I mean, do the models have high basis risk?
Okay. So it appears that there are no easy questions today, but that's fine. I'll answer that as well. So first of all, I'll start with the second one on the basis risk. Some of the ideas that were presented by EINAV are quite innovative in our opinion, as we experienced that some of the area yield index, they lack rigor, meaning that there's a lot of randomness in the selection process of the areas that the inspectors have to attend. What we are trying to suggest is an improvement of that process by essentially clusterizing the area into smaller grids or clusters with similar characteristics, and later on actually improving the product as a result of that, meaning not having the same formula for all the farmers, but perhaps 10 different formulas that are based on the area as the future. This idea has not been tested yet. However, we are quite confident that this will improve the consistency of this product and also its precision. To the first question with regards to the small-scale farmer, so here the reality is that those in these days, we as a company, we as Agritask, we work with a variety of farmers, not only on the insurance side, but also on other verticals within our business that would include food and beverage companies as a prominent example, where we work with some very large organizations that use agronomists that are typically locally located at those areas, and they help in the interaction process with the smallholders. In my personal view, and people were challenging it, and that's fine, I think that in the lengthier term, and that could be 5 or 10 years from now, as the penetration level of mobile phones will be high in rural areas, as well as connectivity, the interaction is going to be much easier, because everything would be essentially processed via smartphones, and that would make and still, because agriculture occupies probably in many countries in Africa, in many countries in Africa, agriculture is the key occupation. So many of the applications on the mobile phone will be related to this occupation. And that's where we think we're doing the right move, i.e. we understand this trend and we want to be the first movers in that.
Oh, great. Thanks. There was also in the very beginning one general question on the different index insurance products, and I know it has been answered by Jeroen partially, and it was addressed by EINAV when she came to area yield, but maybe you can also say a few words, because there are different opinions generally in the community. Some prefer weather index, some prefer area yield. What is your take on it? With the new technology developments, is there rather a shift towards area yield, or is it hard to say? Does it depend on the geography?
Yes, we think it's hard to say. However, area yield index obviously contains more of the human interaction, right? Because you still work with loss adjusters, and also there's a cost to that on the one hand. On the other hand, the index products that are pure index products without any indemnity components are cheaper from an operational perspective. However, they may lack some of the some of the precision that might be obtained through smart, what we think smart area yield index that use also some rigorous process. So I don't think that we have a very clear view on that, on what's going, who of them is going to win, and what percentage of the market will be dominated by each one of them. But we see a clear path for the development of each one of them to better products. But we don't have a clear view on what of them is going to be more beneficial in the future.
Yeah.
Just to add on that sense, I think what's happening is that like some of the weather indexes that we have today are sometimes very simplistic in the way that they are designed. So what's happening is that we have sometimes not a lot of trust, on these products, or like they are not really covering the actual damage of the farmers, and that's why sometimes like people tend to like go for area yield index like when we have the data to create these and design these policies. But in the end of the day, we are covering like all cases when we are covering the yield, and I think that's also what's been happening, and the difference between like weather indexes and area yield index that we also need to consider in terms of where it's going and how we can improve. And this, I agree with Ron, like there is place to improve both weather and area yield. But I think on what's problems today we have in the market and market penetration and trust on these agriculture insurance products, there's also this part of saying, okay, when we cover temperature, we are just covering temperature, and in the end of the day, we want to help small farmers, to be more resilient and help with climate change and their livelihood. So I think there's also good to consider in the cases that it's possible, the area index.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. Maybe a last question also from my side. I think you touched upon it, that the farmers also could get a bigger role and not be just on the recipient end, which I particularly like because I like demand-driven solutions. So maybe you can also enlighten us a little bit on, will this be leading to more farmer-centric approaches? Will it be empowering farmers to take more informed decisions or to have a bigger role even in what products they want? Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. The overall insurance industry is going through personalization. It has nothing to do with crop insurance, and it also not directly related to Africa. The world is changing, and insurance companies are becoming much more customer-centric. We see examples of companies that did not exist 5 years ago, and they've just IPO'd in the New York Stock Exchange this year during the COVID, bringing completely fresh perspective on insurance, and that is personalization. And as I've said, provided that the number or the percentage of farmers in the rural areas using smartphones will be increasing as a tendency to significant numbers in, say, 10 years from now, because their key occupation is agriculture, much of the offering that their apps will be giving them will have to do with agriculture. And one of the use cases we think probably is going to be insurance. Now, when you think about this, a small plot is much easier to monitor than a huge plot. And because for smallholder farmers, their plot essentially determines their livelihood and their resilience, they will be very well motivated to do a good job in monitoring it, i.e. providing information, perhaps on a weekly basis, to the mobile phone, to the insurance company, and the insurers will be also utilizing remote sensing to monitor it, to validate the reliability of those reports. And ultimately, it may become a self-service insurance, which will essentially distinguish between different farmers, despite of them being in the same area. So we definitely believe in personalization in this field, with the use of with the increase of use of technology and connectivity in the rural areas.
Yes, thank you, Ron. Thanks for this outlook. So I think now, unfortunately, the time is really up. I pass over to you. Thanks.
No, thank you so much, Nihat. I think we can rightly say that the panelists have done justice to the topic, regardless of the fact that there are still many questions that were coming in. You can join me in reiterating our thanks to the panelists of today for this enlightening discussions. They really tried to respond to all the questions that were raised. They share a lot of insight with the audience, and I would also like to thank the moderator for bringing his own perspective and also sharing with us some more information on what the climate resilience initiative does, and I hope that could benefit some of the participants to this webinar. Also to thank you for the good management of the sessions and the discussions. We can say that the main takeaway is the evidence relevant technology can enable stakeholders to generate and make use of available data to improve crop insurance practices. Sorry, in Africa, there is a real potential for, as we had the leverage of potentials like of satellite technology, remote sensing. We have heard also about the drones that are posing a lot of possibilities. But clearly, evidence from these discussions and other discussion of agricultural finance is that it has a significant potential in helping to de-risk agricultural value chains and unlocking finance for smallholder or just for the agricultural sector, which is a major challenge for our continent. The webinar of today was attended by a large number of participants. I think we had up to close, from time to time, more than 70 people that joined the platform, which is a good numbers. Among the attendees, we have different profile. I mean, the insurance, the insurance, development banks, academic, which is also the testimony to, I mean, plus the questions, a good testimony of the high interest for this, for the topic. We cannot exhaust all the questions that were asked given the time constraints. But as already indicated, the recording and the presentation will be made available in the course of next week. Normally, we say within 72 hours, which is 3 days, relying on trusted technology that will allow us to get this information and share with you. If you have registered for these sessions or you have attended the session, you will receive it because it's simple with the information. On that note, I would like to thank you all participants. Just saying that the survey will pop up at the end of this session. When you wind up, you have the survey that will pop up. Please fill in the survey as we already requested. That helps us also to improve the quality of our future webinar. I would like to thank you all. This is part of our webinar series. We have more coming on and coming up in the futures, and we will always share the information with you. On that, stay safe and bye-bye to all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.